is Radio Prague International, coming to you from the Czech capital.
Hello and welcome to Radio Prague International. I'm Daniela Lazarová. Coming up in today's program, we'll look at a visit to China by Lower House Speaker Tomio Okamura and the likelihood of a breakthrough on the case of the detained Czech national. The monument to Field Marshal Josef Václav Radetzky is set to return to Prague's lesser town after more than a century. We'll look at why the decision has sparked controversy. And later on, we'll introduce Phonopolis, an exciting new game from the Czech studio Amanita Design. All that coming up, but first, here's the news.
News.
Police have charged 6 people and 2 companies following Tuesday's raid at Prague City Hall's Škoda Palace headquarters, the Czech news agency reported. They face multiple charges, including abuse of office, accepting bribes and money laundering. According to investigators, the suspects operated as an organized criminal group with a clearly defined structure and divided roles. No further details have been released. A Prague district court has rehabilitated 19 Czech dissidents, including underground figure Ivan Martin Jiros, Charter 77 spokesperson Radim Baloš, and co-founder of the Committee for the Defense of the Unjustly Prosecuted Dana Němcová, who were repeatedly imprisoned under the communist regime, the Czech news agency reported. The Prague 1 district court ruled on Monday that the preventive detentions often carried out before public holidays, anniversaries and religious celebrations were groundless. The ruling, issued 37 to 46 years after the event, also condemned the authorities' treatment of dissidents and their families. Škoda Group, one of Europe's leading manufacturers of public transport vehicles, is preparing a new corporate identity after losing the right to use the Škoda name and winged arrow logo. The PPF-owned company must adopt a new name and logo by the end of 2029, when its license to use the Škoda brand expires. From July of 2029, the iconic Škoda name and trademark will be reserved exclusively for vehicles produced by Volkswagen-owned Škoda Auto. Czech Foreign Minister Petr Matýnka will visit Croatia on July 23rd and 24th for talks with his Croatian counterpart, Gordan Grlić Radman, and Prime Minister Andrej Plenković. His program will also include a memorial ceremony in Split to honor the Czech citizens who died in a tragic boating accident in June. The Czech Army's Operations Command held a ceremonial change of guard in Prague on Wednesday. Lieutenant General Václav Vlček formally handed over command at Vítkov Hill to Major General Jaroslav Mika, who officially takes up the post at the beginning of August. Brigadier General Jan Štěpánek, the incoming deputy commander, was also introduced during the ceremony. As part of the event, Jas-39 Gripen fighter jets conducted a ceremonial flyover of Prague. Tram services have been suspended across part of central Prague as the city's public transport operator carries out track repairs in Spálená and Národní streets and on Vítězná street near Újezd. The disruption affects the section between Újezd and Lazarská. No replacement bus service has been introduced, with passengers advised to use the metro instead. Drivers should also expect traffic restrictions as only one direction remains open in most of the affected areas. The works are scheduled to continue until August 10th. And finally, a quick look at the weather forecast. Thursday should be partly cloudy with scattered showers and day temperatures between 17 and 22 degrees Celsius. And that's the end of the news. Czech Lower House Speaker Tomio Okamura has headed to Beijing for the last part of a visit to China. His trip comes against the backdrop of the arrest of a Czech citizen in China and amid suggestions that China could seek to exchange him for a Chinese national accused of spying in Prague. Ian Willoughby discussed the matter with Kateřina Procházková of China Watchers Synospis.
Tomio Okamura is meeting top officials in Beijing on the final days of his visit to China. Is there any chance, do you think, of him making a breakthrough in this matter?
Honestly, regarding the possibility of involvement, Czech politicians, as you mentioned, Tomio Okamura or MP Renata Vesecká, could, in theory, make an informal intervention during their stay in Beijing. However, the chances of their visit leading to any breakthrough are very, very limited. Okamura is neither a member of the Czech government nor responsible for the country's foreign policy. And in cases involving detained foreign nationals, as here, the key actors are typically the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Czech Embassy in China, or, if necessary, there are some direct diplomatic engagements. Additionally, I should also say the Okamura program, it's quite packed, but he is not meeting any important Chinese politicians, or he didn't meet them yet. So I don't think there is a chance to meet anyone significant to start to discuss this agenda.
There are Czech media reports that the security services here are acting on the assumption that China will push to exchange the detained Czech man for a Chinese citizen who's in custody in Czechia on spying charges. But the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs, Petr Matsenka, he says the two cases are unrelated. Do you think he believes that, or is he saying it for tactical reasons?
It is probably more likely that the Czech government and Minister Matsenka is deliberately avoiding public speculations in order not to further damage relations with Beijing and Prague. Or, let's hope, better scenario, I think they don't want to complicate the ongoing diplomatic efforts to secure consular access and resolve the whole case.
Some have said it was inevitable that China would effectively take a Czech hostage after the arrest of the alleged spy here. Is that something you think could be the case?
For sure. China is using this hostage diplomacy quite often. In 2018, there were 2 Canadians detained in China, and both of them were released shortly after Chief Financial Officer of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, returned to China from Canada. There was another case with Australia, with an Australian journalist. There were cases in Japan, and recently there was even an American researcher detained in China. So this hostage diplomacy, it's quite common for Chinese, and they are using it very often, and we should be aware of that.
Finally, how do you think the situation is most likely to play out or to end?
I would say it's very difficult to predict, but in the best case scenario, the Czech citizen receives due process, consular access, and the case would be resolved within a lengthy period of detention. But in the less optimistic scenario, the investigation process under the China state security legislation, as is now, would be lengthy. It would be a lengthy investigation with limited transparency and prolonged the whole legal proceedings. As we could see it in the previous cases that I mentioned, that foreign nationals' detention can last for several years before a resolution is reached. But what is also important to notice that the man is not the first Czech who is detained or imprisoned in China. There's another Czech national, Czech student, who has been serving a very lengthy, I think now it's 5 or 6 years, sentence in China following a conviction on drug trafficking charges. So while this case is legally distinct from the current national security investigation, it can illustrate the legal proceeding involving Czech citizens in China and how that can be prolonged and difficult to resolve through diplomatic channels or diplomatic means alone.
Kateřina Procházková of China Watchers Synospi speaking there to Ian Willoughby. Moving on now, a monument to Field Marshal Josef Václav Radetzky is set to return to Prague's Malá Strana after more than a century. While the decision has broad political backing, some history-minded members of the public still question whether the location is appropriate. Vít Pohanka has more.
You've almost certainly heard Johann Strauss's Radetzky March, the lively tune traditionally played at the Vienna New Year's concert and on many other festive occasions. It is one of the best-known pieces of the 19th century European music. The march was dedicated to Field Marshal Josef Václav Radetzky, one of the Habsburg Empire's most celebrated military commanders who was born into a Czech aristocratic family. For architect Jan Bárta, chairman of the Radetzky Praha Association, bringing the monument back has become an almost 20-year project.
Existoval maršál Radecký, jsem se dověděl pravděpodobně, když jsem poprvé četl třeba o bitvě národů.
Jan Bárta says his interest began with the remarkable career of Field Marshal Radetzky himself. But over time, the campaign became less about the military commander and more about restoring what he considers one of Prague's finest 19th century public monuments.
Těch 41 hlasů, kteří zvedli ruku pro to, tak to rozhodně není z nějakého...
Michael Heres, vice chairman of the Radetzky Praha Association, points out to the outcome of the vote itself. 41 Prague city councillors supported the project, while only 4 voted against it. In his view, that reflects a growing willingness to acknowledge the city's full historical heritage rather than seeing everything connected with the Habsburg monarchy in purely political terms. But not everyone in Prague believes the monument belongs back on Malostranské náměstí.
Jmenuji se Luboš Rokos, pracuji ve zdravotnictví. Historie je můj koníček, udělal jsem si...
Luboš Rokos, a healthcare professional with a university degree in history, says he has no problem acknowledging Radetzky as an important historical figure.
Tam, kde má teď stát, tak vlastně vedle něho stojí palác Směřických. To je dnes budova...
His objection concerns the location. Since one of the buildings of the Czech parliament stands just a few meters away, he believes placing the monument there sends the wrong symbolic message. He suggests that another site, such as Prague's historic military hospital in Validovna, would be a more suitable location.
Všechno na tu minulost je takový smířivější, když se smíří na to Radeckého klidně.
Even Luboš Rokos, however, agrees that today's Czech society is able to look at its Habsburg past more calmly than it did immediately after the creation of Czechoslovakia. In any case, the debate itself shows that history rarely stands still. Instead, each generation finds new ways of interpreting the monuments it inherits.
Vít Pohanka with that report. A reminder that you're with Radio Prague International, the external service of Czech Radio. As some of you may know, Czech studios have produced some highly successful computer games. In the next few minutes, Ruth Franková takes a closer look at one of the latest additions in this field.
Award-winning Czech indie studio Amanita Design has unveiled its latest game, Phonopolis, a story-driven puzzle adventure set in a dystopian city built entirely from cardboard. More than a decade in the making, the game combines puzzle-solving gameplay with a distinctive, handcrafted visual style inspired by avant-garde art. What made the developers choose cardboard as the founding of an entire game world? How do you turn stacks of paper models into a living digital city? And how did a project that took more than 10 years to complete evolve along the way? I discussed these questions with Phonopolis producer Lukáš Kunce. For listeners who haven't come across Phonopolis yet, could you briefly introduce the game and its story and the main characters?
Yes, Phonopolis is basically an adventure game, a puzzle adventure game, like all of our titles. It's very much about the story, about the world, and solving some logical or maybe not so logical puzzles. Phonopolis specifically is about Felix, who is just a regular guy, just a garbage man living in the city of Phonopolis. And this city is very specific or special because it's divided into 3 sort of classes. At the bottom is the workers' quarter, in the middle is the bureaucratic quarter, and at the very top is the avant-garde quarter. And all of this city is controlled by the leader, who is the main antagonist of this game. And the leader is basically a dictator, and he's built a system of loudspeakers all over the city. And through these loudspeakers, he issues commands, audio commands, and controls the entire city. It's basically like a mind control scheme. He has this idea of, making a perfect society, and the execution is very super strict, and nobody has free will and so on. And Felix, the main hero, is just like that. He's also under the control of the loudspeakers until one day he accidentally finds a pair of headphones, and he puts them on, and for the first time he just has his own thoughts and sort of starts thinking for himself for the first time, and rediscovers his humanity, and realizes that this perfect system of the leader is maybe not so perfect, and goes on a journey to stop his plans to sort of control the city forever.
As you said, the story explores themes such as freedom and the abuse of power. What made you want to explore that idea at this particular time? Were you trying to say something about the world that we are actually living in today?
Yeah, I understand why many players will feel like it's very current in today's time. But the truth is that the game was conceived about 13 years ago. So it's not directly, intended to speak about current political issues. But, the truth is it's always been like that in parts of the world. It's just that today it's probably more visible because it's also happening in countries that are closer to us, let's say. And there's also this historical experience as well, definitely, that was probably the key and the major influence on the topic, communism that many of us experienced right here in our country.
The whole world of Phonopolis, including the buildings, the characters, even many of the visual effects, was first created from cardboard and only then digitized. Why did you decide to make the game this way?
There were several reasons why we chose cardboard. One of them was that the team really wanted to sort of take a break from working at the computers and just working on something by hand. The truth is obviously that it's really just maybe 1% or really small amount of work. And most of the work still has to be done at the computer. And the entire process, to put it simply, is that every scene and every level started with Eva Marková, who was the art director and concept artist of the game, and she would draw the scene and the concept art in 2D digitally, and then she would give the concept art to Otto Dostal, who was also one of the main three creators with Eva Marková and Petr Filipovic. So Otto would take this concept art flat in 2D, and he would sort of translate it into 3D space very accurately and precisely, and basically create something similar to theatrical backdrops, and he would texture them digitally. And then he would take these textures and print them, and using a plotter he would cut out stickers, and these stickers would then be put on a big piece of cardboard, and that's when most of the handcrafted part of the work would happen. And we would paint them over with acrylic paint, and create some masks as well, cut them out obviously, and also do a lot of brushing or sanding with sandpaper, sort of give it another level of texture in addition to the cardboard texture, the patina. And then we would take these handcrafted textures basically and take photographs of them under simple lighting, and these photos would be used as textures on the 3D models instead of the placeholders that were used before. And then there was a lot of work in the computer again, because these handcrafted photograph textures still had to be processed a lot in the 3D engine, applying lighting, materials, lots of processing. So that's one of the reasons why the game also took a lot of time to complete.
I also wanted to talk about sound. Music has always played an important role in all your games, I would say, but in Phonopolis, sound is at the very heart of the story. As you said, the characters are controlled by loudspeakers. So what role did music play in shaping the game, and what about the voice acting? Because I think this is actually your first game that features voice acting.
That's very true. Like with all Amanita games, actually the audio, both the music and the sound effects are just as important as the visuals. And every time we play the game and develop the game for a while without the music, then there's a huge difference when the music and sound effects get, implemented into the game. It suddenly gets a completely new life, and we were really delighted to work with Tomáš Dvořák, aka Floex, once again on the music. I think he did a fantastic job. He had to go with a slightly different approach because the city of Phonopolis sort of feels like maybe watching an old movie. There's this lo-fi quality to it. So we try to achieve that using some older devices as well, but not too many of them. But for example, he used an old cassette player that he would run through some of the audio files that he created to again add this sort of specific texture that would be really difficult to add just digitally. Then we had Matouš Godík, who worked on the sound effects, who also previously worked with us on the game Creeks and some others 3. I think he also added a lot to the life of Phonopolis. And then for the voice acting, just like you said, it's the very first time we had like a comprehensible dialogue, comprehensible sentences in the game. All the previous games just had like gibberish, sometimes with a little bit of Czech added to them, but no dialogue or no subtitles at all. And this time the team felt like the story needs to be told a bit more accurately because of the more like serious theme and all that. So we decided to go with voice acting, and funny coincidence is that it was voiced by Joe Etchison, who is from the Great Britain. We previously worked with him on the music for Creeks. He's better known as Hidden Orchestra, probably also known to many Czech listeners of music because he's been playing here quite often. And it was a great collaboration because I feel like Joe immediately understood the sort of purpose and the intended tone of the narrator. We sort of told him it should sound like you're a grandfather telling a story to your grandchildren at the fireplace. Even though the topic of the game is quite serious, we try to keep it like more playful and lighthearted than some of the influences that would be Orwell's 1984, obviously, or Zamyatin's We. It was still supposed to be more like a fairy tale.
As you said, it's an adventure and a puzzle game, and I know puzzles have also been part of Amanita's games. What opportunities did the cardboard world of Phonopolis give you when it came to designing these puzzles?
That's a good one. I would say that it really helped support the feeling of tangibility that we try to some extent have in all of our games, but the fact that it's actually made from physical material, it sort of feels inviting, for the player to touch the objects and everything. One of the main ideas for the puzzle design and the game design was not to just create puzzles, but sort of like interactive toys or toy boxes that would really remind you of like, childhood toys that you just want to tinker with. So yeah, I would say that the tangibility was one of the main benefits of going with the physical material. And I think it's a different question probably, but the interactivity was one of the reasons we went with this creative method that I explained earlier, because back when the project was conceived back in 2013, something like that, the first idea how to create this game was a little more different, because the idea was to glue the models in real life together, like actually have real life scenes, real life models, and take photos of them and use them as sort of like sequences of photos, which would still look great. It would still have a very unique visual quality, but there's very strict limit in terms of interactivity. When you just have photos, it limits the interactivity a lot, and going the route of like 3D models, textured, gave us a lot of space to be able to have a lot of touchable and interactive elements in the game.
You said the original idea came 13 years ago. Does it mean that you have actually been working on this game all those past 13 years, or was it an on and off project?
Pretty much. Well, the history is that the project was conceived in 2013 by 3 former classmates from animation in the Zlín University, Petr Filipovič, Eva Marková and Otto Dostal. And for a while they worked on the game under a different studio, but then the studio wasn't willing to finance the project for all of its development, so they were looking for another studio they would be able to create the game under. And they got in touch with Jakub Dvorsky, our studio director and founder. And Jakub just really liked the vision, like the creative and art direction. And they agreed to do the game together, which was obviously great for the team because Jakub helped them find a lot of collaborators, as well as giving them the opportunity to work with people like Tomáš Dvořák, Floex, or Matouš, who really, I think, helped the game elevate it to the next level. But basically, the game was being worked on constantly for over 10 years, daily.
And when you are creating your games, are you thinking of your potential users? I'm asking because I know your games are particularly popular among families and children. So do you have the users in mind when you are creating these games?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a balancing act, I would say, because we primarily want to make games that we would want to play ourselves, sort of selfishly maybe in a way, but at the same time you can't ignore the fact that you want people to play the games, We're not a studio that would try to follow trends in gaming or anything like that. We just like to do things our way, which seems to have worked for the past 20 or so years, so that's great. And for example, we don't really worry much about like marketing analysis or targeting a specific target audience or anything like that. We kind of try to make things that could be enjoyed by everyone, whether it's small children, whether it's maybe teenagers, adults, seniors, doesn't really matter. The games are accessible in terms of like the control schemes. You don't really need to be like a skilled gamer to enjoy them. It's very much like a very interactive animated movie in a way. And we usually see the best or the nicest kind of feedback from people who would play them with their children. That's always really nice. Even seeing them at events, they would come to the booth. Usually it's the child that is excited for the game, and then the parent joins them and they sort of enjoy the game together. That's always really nice to see.
Are you already working on a new project?
Yes, we actually have been working or operating at Amanita for the past decade or so in like several independent teams. Counting Phonopolis, that would be 3 teams at the moment and a half, I will explain. Aside from Phonopolis, there's 2 other games in development by other teams. One of them is led by Jakub Dvorsky, who previously created, for example, the Samaros series and Machinarium and Pilgrims. And the other team is led by Jaromír Plachý, who did the games Botanicula and Chuchel and Happy Game. And then the half team sort of is Radim Jurda, who has been working with us for a really long time now as well. He was the creator and designer and artist behind the game Creeks. And recently he's been working on a board game, like a physical board game based on the world of Pilgrims. It's called Pilgrims Curious Adventures. He's basically been working on it solo pretty much, but also working with a Czech company, a publisher called Pink Troubadour, who has been helping him a little bit with the design and just finishing the game, but most importantly the publishing side of things and the distribution and all that, yeah.
Do you already know when this will be released?
We sort of soft launched it last year in autumn, September, October, not sure now. But we didn't manufacture that many copies. It was sold out within like a month or so. But now it's coming very soon, at the start of June. It's coming back to stock. And first we only had the English version, but now it's going to be regionally available in many regions and language mutations. And that includes Czech language. So yeah, coming very soon.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and talking to us.
Thank you so much.
And I'm afraid that's brought us to the end of today's programme from Prague. This is Daniela Lazarová saying thanks for joining us and take care.